Awusevele bumbene insimbi yesithupha nalomhla ekseni kungolesibili ngwalomuhle vuka nathi vuka nami angithi vuka nami ngicolisele umlingani lungelele emagagula lo ngeke umbone lomhla ehlelweni ngekuphatheka uthiteke angimcolisele kakhulu kodwa luhlelo kufuna lichubeke nonetheless. My name is Fiso Ngumalo and I'm very happy to be your sole host today eluhlelweni. Good morning once again and welcome to Kusile Breakfast Show. Lo muhla ke sine ma topics lamanengi lesifuna kwakhulumisa, quite a diverse and exciting lineup of interviews that delve into some of the most pressing topics that are affecting our community as well as our economy. We'll have a conversation with Kusile Sbia. He is an economist. By now, a lot of viewers should know who Kusile Sbia is, an esteemed economist that will be providing insights into the ambitious economic developments in Eswatini. These include the construction of the new central bank complex and its broader economic implications. Siyafuna ke kuva about the mall, 2 billion emalangeni mall that has been fully blessed to commence lapha edolobheni eNkhabave kaManzini nana ukuthi ita naipi intuthuko, as well as FDI, foreign direct investment, that we do see coming into Eswatini as well. Just recently we saw the king blessing, giving the royal blessing to the commencement of the Semlex group group projects that are provide a lot of legal documents for Eswatini. It is a foreign company that has come to invest in Eswatini, just in that path of getting Eswatini back to a sustainable path of development. Invite as well as all the other local or rather domestic projects, big projects, by the way, that we see La Paika Eswatini. We'll discuss that with Kusile Sbia. We will also speak with Ngamile Malinga from Eswatini Bank. They want to talk about their Lungisa funeral plan, exploring how it provides crucial coverage for families during challenging times. Sitaxoxisana kabanti ke naye sisiwa kaMalinga. Hanske sitawuphinze sikhulumise indzaba lenkulu, indzaba ye mental health awareness with clinical psychologist Ndo Mdlalose. We want to address the importance of mental well-being as well as some of the strategies to manage stress and difficult emotions. So stay tuned for all these engaging discussions right here on our Kusile Breakfast Show this Tuesday morning. Thank you so much once again for waking up with us. Lomuhla ekseni kulesikhathi sitabuka hloko lethamba embili emaphephandabeni elive lamatsathu. Right, sitawuqala sibuke i-Times of Eswatini. Nathi ke hloko lethamba embili indzaba lenkulu kakhulu. New Manzini Mall to bring over 650 jobs. Ke sakhiwo lesita ukwakhiwa lapha eNkhabave imall itawuletha ke matfuba emsebenzi langetulu kwemakhulu lasitfupha. Maswati ke ayakwethabela lokho. Siyabona tithombe lapha tinsatheli italapha ekhaya Eswatini TV ixoxisana nayo indvuna Commerce Industry and Trade. Sibona uMnkosi Nzinisi ubambe ithulusi lakhe na Nelisiwe Ndlangamandla insatheli yede business ivele iphonse imibuto kuyo indvuna. Kanti ke kulenye indzaba timphunga, senators, civil servants should also declare assets kusho ke timphunga. Dithi ke hulumende tisebenta hulumende, they are filthy rich but no one is holding them accountable. The commission wonders why under-secretaries, parastatals, CEOs and directors are not included. And the businessman H.E. Thomas director passes on. And the how sister-in-law planned in businessman's murder corpse. In the public service PS reports PSU's leadership to corpse. Times of Eswatini zabalehamba embili after steering Swallows to glory. Coach Caleb is in 100,000 emalangeni bounty. Seasoned gaffer reportedly entitled to 10% of 1 million first prize. And again, on another story, no soccer balls. NFD game has been called off. The unthinkable always happens as the two national first division outfits, Lokuyinyanyali Celtics and Louis, could not play their final game of the season at beginning less 26 fixture because of a shortage of match balls. Brother plays in place of Twin, a top flight football club in Romania, is under investigation. This is after reports have emerged that they fielded an eligible player with his twin brother masquerading in his place instead. That's a funny one. Babura Mulasport champion. Siqhubekela mbili sibuka i-Eswatini Observer lomhla ekuseni zaba gijima embili. Senators want civil servants to declare assets. Another senator wants wives to be declared. Senators claim some have unaccounted wealth. Kanzike kulenye inzaba, Vina Mamba is accused of forging a marriage certificate. Well, that's a big case there. Let's happy Mother's Day. As the world celebrated Mother's Day, parliamentarians also got the opportunity to join by sharing hugs and kisses before the start of the workshop hosted by Human Rights Commission in Parliament yesterday. We do see Honorable Minister of ICT Savannah Mazia with Senate President Mage Dlamini. Only God can save Wanderers. That's the biggest story. Wesleyans take on Sundowns in last match. Losing team will be relegated. Promise to fight with all they have. It's going to be an interesting matchup as Bafana Bemtandazo turn to God. Unity saw us through, according to Caleb. This is the MTN Premier League champions Mbabane Swallows coach Caleb Ngwenya, who speaks to the unity, which was the main factor that contributed in the team eventually winning the league. On the last story, CAA finally intervenes in AE club squabble. This one speaks to athletics, where sanity prevails. Eswatini Daily News, making the leading story is the infrastructure development happening in the country. Minister Mangoba Kumalo hands over 2 billion emalangeni more to developers. A very state-of-the-art mall that is going to be constructed lapha ekhaya Eswatini edolobheni lakaManzini. The construction of the Manzini Mall worth 2 billion emalangeni has finally begun at the Manzini All Trade Fair. But together, the project is expected to create more than 1,500 job opportunities for Emaswati. The mall, which is valued at about 2 billion emalangeni, will be constructed at the All Trade Fair, situated on the banks of the Mzimnene River along Gwane Street. And Judge Abande, brother disagree over estate distribution. Examinations Council of Eswatini hosts 14th SAAEA conference, which is the first gathering post-COVID-19. Eswatini Daily News, the biggest story. This one's for you, VG, according to King Pele, as Birds toast 7th league title. Club legend says, indeed, this one's for you, VG King Pele. 16-team league for the 2025-2026 season has been confirmed. And in Africa, Itumeleng Kuna's presence has always been positive at Kaizer Chiefs. Yeah, angako my headlines lomhla ekuseni ephephandabeni yelive siba hlola market. We want to look at tizabata khat Swati lethambe embili esukweni la itolo masibuye at market.
Kuthuthuka kwembango, kuthuthuka kwetinkhundla. Kuthuthuka kwetinkhundla yintuthuko yelive lonke. Thokotela luhlelo sive siyathuthuka nasikulethela intuthuko emimangweni njalo ngabo lesithathu nase ishaye yagabanca insimbi yesithupha kusihlwa. Sive siyathuthuka.
Sotla mahla siphinze sinamukele ehlelweni Kusile breakfast show lomhla ekuseni siphinze sibonge ukuthi nivuke nathi ngalomuhla sithabele nathi indzaba tesiswati. Litiko letasekhaya libhalise emaswati langetulu kwetinkulungwane letingemashumi lamathathu esifundeni saselibonjeni nasesifundeni saseshiselweni ngaphansi kweluhlelo lwekuvakashela imimango kubhalisa sive emaphepha ebuve lelatiwa ngele mopping exercise. Lokhu kuvetwe indvuna yelitiko letasekhaya umvane Nkosi Lindiwe ngesikhathi yasukumisa lolu hlelo uma lisukumisela emphakathi yevusweni.
Litiko letasekhaya lasukumisa lolu hlelo lokuvakashela imimango kubhalisa sive emaphepha ebuve ngeminyaka wa-2021 kude lonke liswati libhaliswe latiwe libe ingcenye yemininingwane welive ngebantu pheceleti National Population Register. Indvuna yetiko letasekhaya umhlonishwa umphane Nkosi Lindiwe ivakashele umphakathi wasevusweni ngaphansi kwenkundla yankomo yahlaba kusukumisa isigaba salolu hlelo sesithafu lapho kutawuvakashelwa khona imimango yesifundza sakamanzini. Indvuna ke ithi lokubhalisa kumcoka njengoba lelitiko kuletifundza letimbili libhalise sive lesingetulu kwetinkulungwane letintsatfu waveta nekuthi babhalise gogo loneminyaka lelikhulu nelishumi nesikhombisa 117.
Singasho ukuthi kulokusebenza kweflexibility lesebenza eshiselweni naselibonjeni sebesibambisene nawo wabetikhulu wema development partners ethu sikhonile ukuthi sibhalise abantu labangama 30,892 labang 18,000 wakhona 354 bekungema birth registrations bekulaba lababhalisa itifiketi tekutalwa. Kepha-ke emkhathini walaba lababhalisa itifiketi tekutalwa esikhundle eshiselweni enzaweni lapho kuthiwa khona kusenkonga kuleyo chiefdom leyo sihlangane nagogo lona 117 weminyaka lesimbhalisile gogo Mathe sikhaze ukuthi kube ingqayizivela ukuthi sithole umuntu omdala kangaka kuba sophila iminyaka le over 100 keda akatiwa lethu khona la kangwane.
Sikhulu semphakathi wasevusweni umphane Nkosi senza ngakhona sithi imisebenti lenjena isho intfutfuko yelive laseSwatini.
Yekunene kayiphumula ibekele igama lankwe embili njoba nje kutele ndvuna la kuthi Nkosi mathupha yena yathi ifikela kuto tonke letigaba nase ikhokha induna yayo iphume yona mathupha ngakho ke sekhutha lwandle silibhekisa kuye wekunene sibonga lo msebenzi longaka.
Lilunga lephalamende lenkundla yankomo yahlaba Mduduzi Dlamini libonga litiko letasekhaya ngalo msebenzi.
Simcele lokusiphumani ngetinkhani nibambise litiko kulokukhulu ongaka lelisendele bona nawo usuka la uya kamanzini noma embabane ubhadala imali letinenge kodwa namhla siyabonga nje ukuthi basite konke kumanghala.
Mabhalane lomkhulu etiko letasekhaya uthi lelitiko litawuphindze lisukumise wona umsebenzi wokubhalisa itibhedlela letinemagumbi ekubelekisa kubhalisa abantfwana labatsandza kutalwa kanti litiko letasekhaya kubheke ukuthi libe liwephetsa lo msebenzi ngenyanga yemphala kulomnyaka. Etindzabeni Eswatini TV kubika Samkelisiwe Khoza ngasimuva Shongwe evusweni.
Emabandla eluhlolo ema-Exams Council langephansi kwesifundza leSentance ne-Afrika i-SADC ahlangene esukwini layitolo emhlanganweni welishumi-nakune the 14th Southern Africa Association for Educational Assessment Conference. Hansi lo mhlangano uhlose kubuketa tindzaba tekutfutfukisa lizinga lemfundvo e-Afrika kuteke libe ngilelingcono. Indvuna yetemfundvo umhlonishwa owenqumalo ithi uhulumende welive lakangwane usemkhankasweni wekuvala sikhala lesikhona ke emkhatsini kwebafundzi labasemaphandleni nalabo labasemadolobheni kugcine ke kude umehluko longanani kulelizinga lemfundvo labalitfolako.
Lamabandla elihlolo eAfrika aye ahlangane njalo ngeminyaka uyobuka indlela tekuthuthukisa imfundo eSADC kanzi ngenxa yemkhuhlane we-COVID-19 lamabandla akakhoni kuhlangana kuleminyaka lengcile lokhu sekahlangene sibayeni lodge namuhla. Sicubulo salomhlangano sithi Transforming Educational Assessment for Quality, Equality and Fairness in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Umphathi wetikolo alungelo Nhlengethwa lebekamelele indvuna yetemfundvo umhlonishwa owenqumalo uchaza ngebumcoka balomhlangano.
Sesemhasini yokushintsha imfundo ibe ngcono ngakho-ke ngiko sesithi-ke lo bafikile laba sitawukopana la kubo namaphepha laba abaphrisela kuleli viki leli sitawusebenzisa wona kulamanye akhona sikhanze ukuthi sitawukhona kwasebenzisa for kwakha le assessment yalabantwana lokuthi sibafundisa nyalo mangakhumbula siqale i-CPE primary leka grade 6 nyalo nayo kufanele sibe nendlela yokuthi sita-examina kanjani ngibone amaphepha bathi abaphrisela abanye banamaphepha lakhuluma ngale CPE kukhona futhi nokuthi sine 4-year program e-high school nyalo lesiyiqalile lesiyihlunge form 1 form 2 form 3 waba ngu2 years so nalapho siba ne-checkpoint nalapho sitawukhanda ukuthi khona ababhale ngaloko lesitakufunza khona sokusebenzisa kahle kuze kuthi le-education system yethu ingabi ngilelahlekakho.
Umphathi we-Exams Council kuleli Mandlenkosi Dlamini uthi luhlolo ludlala indima lebanti ekucecesheni bafundzi etifundweni tabo.
Lesiye sikulwele ngilokuthi labantu lesi ngibona sibanika lama exams noma lawo mave lama stakeholders ethu abe ne trust nathi le intercritical examination. Intercritical exam kuyimoso ukuthi ukwenza ukuthi bese kuba nekungahambi kahle kwehlolo lesingathi lesikhathi kuba nabo leakage kube nabo malpractice lekuyinto ke lecishe if affect onke lamave la khona eSouth Africa.
Sihlalo wesayeya Dr. Moretti Tobeja uthi luhlolo lwebafundzi eAfrika kumele lube sezingeni lelifanako. Isayeya nayo isemkhankasweni wekwakha imigomo letawucinisa luhlolo eAfrika naletawucinisekisa ukuthi titifiketi letitfolwa abafundzi titawusebenta ngisho kulamanye emave langephasi kwakhe sayeya. Etindzabeni ngingiphokuhle Dlamini ngikaManzini.
Libandla lelibuke emalungelo ebantfu lithi liyasebenzisana naletinye tinhlangothi letibuke inhlalakahle eMaswati kucinisekisa ukuthi akekho eMaswati noma ke kude eLswati lelinyathelelwa emalungelo alo. Kepha-ke kusathinga ukuthi kuqiniswe leminye imithetho lengamele kusebenta kwalo. Lokhu kuvetwe lisekela lakhomishana kuleli bandla Duduzile Dlamini emhlanganweni netimphunga.
Libandla lelibuke emalungelo ebantfu nenhlalakahle yesive ye-Eswatini Commission on Human Rights and Public Administration ibambe umhlangano netimphunga endlini ngomsombuluko kutifundzisa ngemsebenti walo lelibandla lebekuphindze kungumsebenti wekubhalisa nekwetfula imphahla letinayo timphunga ngaphambi kwaleli bandla pheceleti Declaration of Assets. Lisekela lakhomishana kuleli bandla Duduzile Dlamini lithi leli bandla lidzinga kubanjiswa ngiyo iphalamende kuphathisa imitsetfo lemibili lesakhankanya letawuvumela leli bandla ukuthi litimele kute likhone kusebenta kahle tindzaba.
Indzaba yema-overlaps ngicela sengikhulumile nje lekundaba zabantu asikhulumi tindaba zabantu letikuba beboshifu asitikhulumi ngaphandle mangabe kukhona nesesibona nje ukuthi hayi sengithethele icinga kakhulu lendzaba sengagcine ibe netinkinga sesike sabona nje kakhulu lendzaba temhlaba waphuta lesinonza siyabobotha la isuka khona sekubendeka inhlekelele kumele bengakafanele bengavimbeleka. Indzaba yokuthi abantu abafuni uyafuna mama sesigabeni kodwa akafuni ukuthi yena aphathwe. So ngikukhutshana nje kumpela kungathatha sanzeke. Lesicela ukuthi sibambisane ngoba phela uthi ngasikhathi sowulapha eoffice le usiphathi mandla so uhlukile wena usafanani nje nalolimi lapha phasi so le ndlela lutiphatha ngayo vele ifune ihambisane nalesigaba lophiso nale ndlu lokiyo iyahlonipheka indlu kuswayo malunga lahloniphekile lilunga lehloniphekile ke lomunye umuntu nje longakafanele kusabe nelichashada.
Mengameli wetimphunga imphunga Lindiwe Dlamini uthi kumcoka ukuthi leli bandla lisebenzele ukuthuthukisa tindzaba tenhlala kahle nemalungelo eMaswati.
Ngicabanga ukuthi i-commission ivakele dikhalo tayo. It's a very important commission njengoba timphunga tonke bedisho. Ngidivotile nje ngedwana ukuthi ingabe commission yethu lenhlaka kangaka leyaqalwa nakubekwa nakuphuma i-constitution yethu. Benginyathela kahle yini lelende yasukuma kancane kakhulu. Ngiyayiva lo lwimi lebalukhuluma kuyeva ukuthi commission yethu vele babuka inhlalakahle yawo eMaswati ngoma commission human rights lamaningi uyokhanza ukuthi abesaba neliswili thide ukhanza mhlambe sayaphathiswa akasakhuluma ubuve benu but commissioner wethu usibekele kahle ukuthi kuko konke bakhona buka ukuthi inhlalakahle yabo bonke labakhona even
leli bandla ke libe seliniketa dona timphunga emaphephe kwetfula nekubhalisa impahla njengokugunyatwa nguye umthetho lokubheka ukuthi timphunga tiwetfule khona endlini ngalesibili embikwalo leli bandla etindzabende Eswatini TV kubika Samkelswe khoza na Fabrice Simsonera eParliament.
Timphunga tithi tilungele kubambisa libandla lelibuke emalungelo nenhlalakahle yesive kuteke lakhe imithetho letawenta ukuthi leli bandla libe nematinyo lalumako. Timphunga betikhuluma ngesikhathi leli bandla lifundzisa timphunga ngekusebenta kwalo leli bandla.
Cela ukuthi commission isitshele lokho ukuthi sisita ngani nyalo thine kwenda ukuthi ibe empowered. Itokhona kwenda nakulesi kushoko ngaphandle kwena kulokusho umuntu omntwana nami lengamade ukuthi ungihlolelana la ekhaya eParliament asi bantu abahambe bayoboshwa bagange phindze bahlole bafati babo umhlolo ke loyo ngizange senguve kodwa nje cha ngithi nje Madam President sicela ukuthi commissioner lophethe commissioner sitshele nyalo ukuthi nangabe lo mthetho sokwaqala lokusenyetwa ukuphi ubambe phi.
I'm interested kakhulu kulele of enabling legislation lokho ukuthi ingabe kufanele bebobanda laba usungulako ngoba siyadothi kufuna kutholakala information lapha lapho bese kuyasungulwa ke noma ecala kuba ipolice noma kuba ingcine kuyibhili lokuthi bobanda aba responsible akusibo yona le commission
abena kuhlukumetheke malungelo basi bahlola nalaba lapha uthi laba lapha ekhulukuthu ingabe akusiko yini ukuhlukumetheka malungelo sibangahle bathola lokusiba uthokothisa laba bekunene laba bacisile laba bese bamthethe nje mina so yasala umngami
endlu esesiqiniseni siyade edolobheni ukuthi masipala uye abe ngokuthi uya evaluator maybe njalo ngeminyaka bese uyayisho le value yalo mhlaba wakho lo nendlu noma lo de indlu lana esiqiniseni ke sisebenzisa lokho ihlobo uma ngabe sengifuna ku estimator ivalue ya lendlu leyakhile lehlangene nalo mhlaba lehlele ko sibe sadingani kwekuthi nangoke lilungelo lami selinyathelekile sengiphuma ke ngibheka kuphi ngoba ngicabanga ukuthi lo msebenzi njengoba ubekekile muhle mkhulu futhi ungayiproject ngoba kukhulunywa nayo ukuthi public protector so uyabuka ke ukuthi nasi ke sive sifuna ke lokho kuprotecteka bayayibende njani.
Obviously bashushisi even learning Africa lithi kwamanje kusengakefike esigabeni sokuthi linganika abasolwa ecaleni lekudubula ababulale umhlabelelo wetingoma tingoma ke te hip hop lowatiwa nga Kian Forbes anatabelo tips Motswane bufakazi balabo labatofakaza kuleli cala labasolwa labo ngulabo lababili lababoshwe kuleli kanti ke mabito abo ngusiyabonga Gezani Indimande kanye nemnakabo Malusi Dave Indimande.
Labasolwa bacelwa kunika ubufakazi lobuphelele lobutokwetfula bofakazi kulamacala lababhekene nawo i-full docket disclosure umelo labasolwa lokungisive sonke ngwenya wabhalela lehhovisi lebashushisi kuleli lapha acela imininingwane ngalesicelo sekuthi labasolwa bahambe bayobhekana nemacala abo eveni laseNingizimu Afrika. Umqondisi welehhovisi lebashushisi eveni laseNingizimu Afrika Advocate Elaine Harrison sowuphendvulile kulesicelo sebasolwa emaphepheni lawafaka enkantolo kamantshi kaManzini. Harrison uthi ufakazi lobuphelele babufakazi kuyaye ebukhishwe mase kubekwe ukuthi licala litawucala nini kutekwa noma ke uma licala selilungele kutekwa. Uthi lokho kwentela ukuthi basolwa abakhona kulungiselela kutekwa kwelicala labo asuke babekwe wona. Uchubeka uthi ngekwemithetho yelive laseNingizimu Afrika ufakazi lobuphelele babufakazi abukhishwa kulesigaba elisesekile lelicala lebasolwa. Uthi futhi lobufakazi baloluhlobo abukhishwa ngisho umsolwa asacela imvume yokutokela ngephandle enkantolo. Advocate Harrison uchubeka uthi basolwa batonika ubufakazi uma sekusikhathi lesifanele. Lo mqondisi uchubeka uthi angeke kube nebulungiswa ukuthi kukhishwe amagama bofakazi kwamanje uthi kumcokwa kusemacele nalolu hlobo bofakazi bathole kuvikeleka. Uchubeka ungeta ukuthi umthetho uyalivumela lehhovisi lengqogqoshe emthetho ukuthi lingabafihla bofakazi ecaleni kakhulu nalinetiseka ukuthi bofakazi kungenteka basetshiswe noma ke batfuse ukuthi bethule ubufakazi babo. Uthi kungumbono wakhe ukuthi kuleli cala labofakazi kungenteka basatshiswe. Advocate Harrison wente isibonelo sekuthi esifundeni saKwaZulu-Natal kulesinye isikhathi bofakazi bagcina babulewe noma ke basabsiwe ukuthi bangethuli ubufakazi babo. Uchubeka ukuthi nakungadalulwa manje ubufakazi lobuphelele babofakazi usho ukuthi kutakhishwe amabito abo tindzawo labahlala kuto lokutakwenta ukuthi bofakazi babe sengotini. Emanga nemaciniso ubufakazini lobufulile atawunqunywa inkantolo lelela lesicelo selive laseNingizimu Afrika. Lesicelo selive laseNingizimu Afrika sekuthi labasolwa bendluliselwa kulela live esibheke ukuthi sichubeke nekutekwa kusasa ngalesibili enkantolo kamantshi kaManzini. Etindzabeni kubika Fortune Dlangamandla ngisembabane.
Ijaji lenkantolo ye-70 Industrial Court of Eswatini Abande Dlamini kanye nemnakabo Melusi ababoni ngasolinye ke kwabiweni kwelifa lababewabo Musa Dlamini. Melusi ukhala ngekuthi wasuswa ekubeni ngilomunye walaba balifa lemufi kanti ke ijaji Abande lithi lona bamsusa Melusi kulandzela ukuthi bekabambelela kwabiwa kwalo lelifa.
Umufi Musa Dlamini lebeka ngiprofessor enyuvesi yelakuleli washona ngeminyaka wa-2021 washiya ngemva bomkakhe lababili lokungabsile kanye nasibongile. Bantwana labaphilako bayimfica basithupha labatfolakala kulabomake bese laba labanye batfolakala ngephandle. Imfodzana yemufi Melusi Dlamini iveta kukhala kwayo embi kwekhomishana lephenyatinsolo tekungaphatheki kahle kwemafa ehhovisini lakaMaster.
During my father's demise mina ngisasesha nje ngisesha ukuthi mhlawumbe kukhona lamshiyele kona loyo mbala. Be it, I don't know, be it trust or cause supposedly will. So during my searching and everything, ngase ngiyakhishwa. Kwathiwa I'm frustrating the whole situation and nalo make ngibhizi ngihamba ngimbuta le because kwakunalo make babele bangibita ngamake dala. Abesebenza ngalanga ngumlihle ngiyahlise. Since ngangingi-executor kwendeka during the course of my duties as an executor ngakhishwa ukuthi ngibe ngi-executor.
Ijaji lenkantolo ye-70 liyaphendvula.
Remove as executor. We called about 5 meetings for us as executors. He'd always give an excuse why he couldn't attend. As Chelos Astube. Melusi has always believed we went to Baba's file, looked through the file, there was no will. We searched everywhere. There is no will. Yeah, now he has always had this belief in his head, Washi will, and I heard from Mage Lamkwanas Gutsi, Wamchela Gutsi, Uyatina Gutsi, Iwili they share everything to him. He also had this belief Gutsi Estate Yababe was worth more than 30 million. According to him, Wamchela Gutsi, he's worth more than 30 million. So he was looking for this money. Going to the banks, going to insurance companies, looking for my investments about it. We gave him all the opportunity to search. We searched as well, nothing. All we found was what the subcommittee compilers inventory ala master.
Isiyala master kaManzini Makhosazana Mdlulu uveta lokwatiko ngalokwabiwa kwalelifa.
He was removed on after the fourth and the fifth account was done. He was removed. He was not an executor at that time. But the first, second, and third, basically. So I think it's something because their family, it's something that they can agree on the issue of payments, alama executors fees. Maybe they can do it or estate as a stake later in any event.
Sihlalo wekhomishana lephenyatinsolo tekungaphatheki kahle kwemafa ehhovisini lakaMaster, ijaji Mashayenga Dlamini liveta umuvo walo kulendzaba.
Naye wadinga ukumisa kwaze kwenza isikhathi ungakendi lutho. Ngibona ngoba kusola nje ukuthi uyababambelela. Uthatha isikhathi leside ukuthi udecide ukuthi ufuna kwendani. Ukuze kwenze isikhathi.
Lifa lemufi lifaka ekhathi emakhaya amabili kanye nezimoto letimbili letanikwa bomu kamufi. Lenye impahla lekhona ifaka ekhathi liplazi lebelibita 2 million emalangeni lelathenga umzalelo likaze lisesivokotho. Lenye impahla lekhona stand steki lekusamele sabiwe kubala kulokunye. Dindzabeni kubika Fortune Dlangamandla ngisembabane.
Sele malanga lang 19 ukuthi likhethelo lesive esihlangu semnikati litfola netulu nelive leAngola ngaphansi kwema World Cup qualifiers eminyaka wa 2026. Kodwa ke lelikhethelo solo lide umceceshi libandla letemidlalo lihlanganisena ngombiko. Lisekela lamengameli wenhlangano lengamele ekudlalisa ematubane emhlabeni Jackson Tui livakashelela kuleli kutawubuka inchubekela phambili yemidlalo wematubane asekuleli inhlangano lengamele tinhlangano tetemidlalo. Ikomiti leliphethe imihlangano yemidlalo wematubane kanye nemacembu yemidlalo wematubane. Sibahlo emakethe uma sibuya sicocisana nalabachamuka eSwatini Bank.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi.
Aba research bafunze.
Being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kulula.
Nathi kufuna sente ukukhicita lokusembili.
Renewal of TV licenses for 2024 is now open. Here is a quick reminder. A viewer's TV license costs 180 emalangeni per device. Other accessories such as decoders and set-top box cost 50 emalangeni per device. For traders and repairers, TV license costs 300 emalangeni per business area. And now, to pay your TV license, use these following methods. You can use MTN Mobile Money with the number 76222000 or dial *007 *3 *7#. Or you can use Eswatini Imali. And you can pay our TV license at any post office in the country. Another option is you can use any Nedbank branch using our TV license account number 119900430037. Don't forget, when paying for your viewer's TV license, reference with your PIN at all times. And when paying for a retailer TV license, reference with your TIN at all times. For more information, call us on 7802-4543 or 34050163 or 34020879. And you can send us a WhatsApp message on 762222000.
Minutes after 6. Thank you so much for staying with us. Nalomhla ekuseni. It is the 14th of May, a Tuesday morning. Kusile breakfast show. Sbaguti usjoine nalomhla. Now next we want to speak with Ngamile Malinga from Eswatini Bank. Sifuna kukhulumisa their Lungisa funeral plan. ibuka ke tindzaba letahlukene but tindzaba leti crucial kakhulu in their coverage for families during challenging times. Ncamile, welcome to the program. Nasikhuluma ngema funeral cover, we actually realized during the advent of COVID-19 bumcoka bawo, and I think so many people were woken up to the idea that I should get a cover, I should get a funeral cover. Sibuke na Eswatini Bank ngicabanga ukuthi vele this one is tailored for eMaswati. Ibuka tonke ukuthi tindzaba tinsaya letikhona eveni letibhekene neliswati. Ngisakuvusela nje ngikwamukela ehlelweni ngicabanga ukuthi umbukeli utibuta umbuto lomkhulu kakhulu lomcoka ukuthi isebenza kanjani ilungisa funeral plan cover. Good morning.
Sivusele Nxumalo, sivusele nakubo babukeli emakhaya. Sibonge naleli thuba ukuthi lenesinekete lona Eswatini Bank ukuthi sidokhulumisa yona iproduct yethu lengilungisa funeral. Kusho ukuthi lungisa funeral plan ngomasingcwabisane lokuyi product Eswatini Bank lo wabuka ukuthi ayakhele wona eMaswati kwekuthi akhone ukuthi asitakale ngetikhathi lapho khona kuvela tinkinga tekokuthi sesilahlekelwa etihlobo tethu lapho sisesangene nje sisehlangahlangene uyakhona lungisa kwekuthi ubese so ukhipha imali le iba ilump sum lokusuke kungile mali le lisuke lilunga livumelene ngayo kwekuthi litayitfola uma sekufuna ukuthi liyofihla leto tihlobo talo.
Ngiyatibuta nje njengoba uyaveta la ukuthi uthi naso hlangabetane nalensaya leno umuntu lungisa ufike bese solungisa konke. Asakulungisa konke lokulakulungisako. Ngiyafala ukuthi sikhulumise leyo mali sivumelana na ubekisa nje ukuthi ubese lungisa sokhokha le mali le iclient ivumelene ngayo nelibhange. Athini lama terms and conditions around leyo mali leyo ingaqala kumalini from as little as how much to as big as how much?
Sibonga Nxumalo. Ngumbuto lomuhle kakhulu lo. Cishe ngingaqala ngekuthi ngichaze nje kancane kwekuthi kude ube lilunga lalungisa kufuna ukuthi kwendekeni. Kufuna ukuthi ube ne-account Eswatini Bank, ube neminyaka lesuka ku-18 years kuya ku-70 years. Uvumelekile nokuthi ufake batali bakho ngoba siyati ukuthi simalunga nje sishiye batali emakhaya. Uyakhona kwekuthi ungamthatha lungisa kusukela emalini lengu-8 emalangeni 25 cents. Kushiyane ngetidzingeko takho nobe ngesidingeko sakho kwekuthi ngabe lilunga belifise kukhava bamfu labangakhi nobe ke ibudget yakho ime kanjani ngoba kufuna sinake naloko ukuthi this is a lifetime thing. Utawuchubeka nje ke kude kufikele ilanga lokuthi se uyasishiya emhlabeni nobe labo lobakhavile sebashiya emhlabeni, so kufuna kube kungabi ipremium ugcine seyikukhama.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that makes sense. Ekubeni imember sothi senzabe ukuthi kufuna ukuthi umuntu abe imember in order to get these benefits. Asongichazele kabanti ke la kubeni imember, because what I've learned is that kuphindze kube nema waiting period. We're talking about getting premiums here. We're talking about getting benefits. I don't think ukuthi ngawuvele ngwa, for lack of a better word, and I apologize for using this word, I cannot enjoy the benefits of this service or this product immediately after applying. Say I've lost a family member, like you have said, I'm also allowed to said I've lost a parent, hypothetically speaking, God forbid. I lose a parent, I just applied for the funeral cover. I cannot get that money surely, immediately.
Yes, kuliciniso lelo. Siba nayo i-waiting period lenganga 6 months. Kusho ukuthi nje kude ukuthi ube lilunga lelingakhona ukuthi li-benefit fully, kufuna ube umhlalile 6 months, uphinze ube umbhadele 6 months premiums. Lokusho ukuthi inyanga leting6 utihleti nalama premiums akho ahambe nato letinyanga abe ngu6. Yes. Bese siphinze ke i-waiting period yethu iba nako kwehluka ke lapho khona kuba netimo letinye ngoba kuba khona letinye timo letingetulu kwemandla lokhanza kwekuthi linga nobe loyo lokhaviwe so bese sewuyatibulala lapho i-waiting period kuba ngo-24 months which is 2 years nakhona asimvaleli ngaphandle loyo muntu siyakhona ukuthi simnikete icover akhone ukuthola i-benefit yokugwabeka kahle uma angasekho.
Okay, so that's 24 months for suicide.
24 months, yes, for
okay,
suicide.
In the case of the inevitable, because I do see how a suicide is, you know, self-inflicted, so to speak. We attend our mundo, so I would get the justification for 24 months. In the case of the inevitable, like a car accident, what happens there?
Ngibonga kakhulu Sifiso nangabe kungukuthi ukufa kube ngeke ukuthi ingodi kuba bede i-waiting period immediately ubhadale the first premium and then you are fully covered so you can enjoy the benefits.
Okay, that's great. I suppose yeah ngilapho ke umbukela afika athi khona that's nakuphela lelihlelo nje that's nakubumbana insimbi yesiphohlongo avele ashaktela kubhekise khona Eswatini Bank le funeral cover lena it's you get to enjoy the benefits immediately should an accident happen, so you do see how, you know, these benefits will help you or should help you should you know, get an accident ekhaya. Sichubekele mbili ncamile sibuke indzaba ngawuthi yekucoverisha the entire family. I come from quite a big family. Engabe utsinzile nje indzaba yokuthi I can also cover abadali bami. Engabe indzaba entire family yona indzaba lesinga engage asithi.
Eswatini Bank ukubukile lokho ngeliso lelibandi kakhulu siyaconza ukuthi singemaswati sisuka emakhaya lapho khona sihlala netihlobo tetfu sikhulisa nebamfana ukhanze ukuthi nabogogo kunebamfana laba bakhulisako labashiwe batali ngekuthi kumbe sebashonile abasekho nalapho le product yethu leyo iyakhona ukuthi imthathe loyo muntu loyo lesibabita ngokuthi ngema extended family members lokusho ukuthi nje in short uma ngabe li customer noma lilunga lifisile ukuthi liwafake ema extended family members iminyango ihlale njalo ivulekile siyakwemukela lokho.
Do we have a cap or do we inombolo yokuthi ningaba bangaki? Because I would assume imindeni lemikhulu lengiyibonile so mekuva nombolo that's a nuclear family that I'm talking about, by the way. Kanza ukuthi maybe 15 at most, abanye bafika ku 20. Nineke nibeke i-cap let's see.
Oh yes, ukhona kufaka emalunga langendluli ku9.
Okay.
Yes. And kufuna kube ngemalunga leni sonzelene cishe kakhulu ngekwengadi kubekisa nje kancane kube kuthi kumbe ngaba ngisisi wakho kungaba ngibhuti wakho sebomshana nabo batukulu njengalokho besikhulumile ukuthi nagogo nje angamufaka umtukulu cishe kungeda kuloko nabo labala usuku ubafakile lama extended family members kufuna bangabi ngetulu kweminyaka leng70.
Okay. Maybe asasibalekele nang extended kenyalo sibuye kuna ngumndeni lesikhanza ukuthi it's a nuclear family khona ukhanza ukuthi kunebantwana umfana ke sithi ngeSiswati engcenye buphela buntwana ku 21 years of age. Siyaqala ku 18 years, I believe it did say your eligibility starts from 18. You correct me there. Engabe bantwa bami khona, is it an unlimited number of bantwa bami lengingababhalisa lapho noma nakhona sine cap?
Yes, bantwa bakho kude limit.
Great.
As long as utaba nayo i-proof in the form of a birth certificate kuthi bantwa bakho. Empeleni nje lungisa wethu uhlukene kabili. Kuba khona member only lokusho ukuthi lilunga likhethe ukuthi kumbe lisengakabi nemndeni yes lisesengathathi uyangena yedvana siphindze sibe ne family plan lapho kusho ukuthi lilunga liyakhona ukuthi lingangena nemndeni walo. Uma ngikhuluma ngemndeni walo ngikhuluma ngekuthi ngikhuluma ngebamfana, ngikhuluma ngemkakho noma ngababwa kakho. Bobabe bavumelekile bona ukuthi bangakhona kufaka cishe bomake babe babili lokusho ukuthi bafatile ababili yes phasi kwayo yona le cover le. Then bamfana kuba unlimited, kuba bede limit until abe naye 21 years. Uma ngabe usafunza siyalula simnikete up to 25 years as long as itaba khona iproof kwekuthi usesesikolweni.
Mfana vele esikolweni.
Yes, ngumfana. Phinze nalaba disabled yena ke akaphumi uhlale njalo angumfana ngoba uyohlale ay dependent loyo. Yes, naso umfakile nje akabe sekuthi nasekafika kulo 21 years sekufuna aphume.
Yeah. Ngiyibona le service lapha ukuthi ifike ingijabulisa kakhulu ngoba sibabona sibakhona bobabe lokhanza ukuthi bantwana bona abafuni babe less than 12. Abantu babukhanza ukuthi bale kubo 15 ukhanza ukuthi vele labanye bana labo bafate engcenye lababidlana bantwana ke lapho vele sikathile ukuthi bangaba nang 20. So lo lungisa funeral cover uyavuma lo ukuthi bonke labantu labo ba benefit from the cover. Let's talk about the principal member of the cover now passing on, because that could also happen. Good umuntu lo infallible sonke sidawuhamba lapha emhlabeni. Engcenye I'm the person that opened the funeral plan. And sengiyabashiya ke sengiyawushiya umndeni wami emhlabeni. Engabe lapho niyayeni bese nenda njani ngibese ngihamba nayo yonke noma bayachubeka basale na kwente kanjani la?
Ngumbuto lomuhle loyo Nxumalo. Uma sekwenteka noma asesiqale nje nganayile sele kancane ngala ebamfaneni bese khuluma ukuthi bamfana nasebana 25 years nangabe bayafunza babe sebayaphuma nobe bana 21 years njengalokho besike sachaza ukuthi kukhona le benefit ma extended family members. Uma se afikile lo mfana ku 21 years uvumelekile ukuthi ubese soyamthatha umfaka ngale kuma extended family members uma ngabe kungukuthi kukhanya kona ukuthi usese dependent kuwe. Yes, usesengakhona ukutimela. Bese sibuya khona ke kulenzaba locetha kuyikhulumisa manje ukuthi nako lilunga seliya shona lungisa usendele imvo lenhle kakhulu ayibese seyiyaphela le cover yethu lapho. Lokwendekako munye walaba khaviwe uma ngabe anaso sifiso sekuthi angachubeka nale policy siyamniketa lethuba lelo kepha naye kufuna ukuthi abese sovula yona le account Eswatini Bank achubeke lapho khona kugcine khona lilunga.
Yeah. Utsinze indzaba ekuthi I can select an amount of the cover that I require from as little as 8.25 cents. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's very accommodating. I think lonke liswati lapho liyakhona kusitakala 8.25 cents. Ngabe kubese ke kuthatha isikhathi lesingakanani ekuthenini ukhone kutfola i-payout?
Uma sekwentekile kwaba nalesihlakalo sekuthi kube khona lo shonako kuyaye kube ngo-48 hours i-turnaround time yetfu. Lokusho ukuthi nawo lethe nje kahle tonke timpepha takho letimcoka kakhulu lesiyayistidzinge nje kuba ngiso certificate sekufa certificate sekushona nema copies beneficiary shothi loyo lo claimant lobombhalisile ukuthi utawuclaima le mali nakungathiwa uyashona kubese kuba ne-ID yakhe loshonile. Kuyaphuthuma nje kakhulu because lapho siyaconza ukuthi vele imali le mali isuke idzingekile nalo li customer lisuke lisehlangehlangene. Lokuhle futhi lapho le mali nakayitfola simniketa imali lengicash ngoba siyaconza ukuthi tindleko temgcwabo ticala ngalelanga lo loshile asekushiwo nje ukuthi ushonile ukhanze ukuthi sekutawudzingeka tona timali tabo petrol kudzingeka khona timali tabo airtime nalokwa kuthi kufika lona lelilanga noma lesikhathi sekungcwaba sekucishe kusebente almost half of the money lobo yitfolile, so siyakhona ukuthi sikunikete cash.
Okay. Well, Ncamile, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Sithemba ukuthi amaSwati avile. We hope you're going to have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ncamile Malinga, insurance officer with Eswatini Bank. Nangabe ke unetindlebe ngicabanga ukuthi sewuvele ulungisa emaphepha akho ukuthi uhambe uyavula nangiyalungisa makumbana insimbi yesiphohlongo lomuhla ekuseni. Ma benefits maningi kakhulu. You have to be an account holder. She said that quite frankly. So lungisa ke timphepha takho uvele uphonseke khona lomuhla ekuseni. A lot of benefits that you get to enjoy with this funeral cover. Nuclear family has an unlimited allowance to kubanvana. Nangabe ke ungileli hlobo vele lithi utawuba nebanvana labaningi kakhulu. Worry not, you can still register all your kids under this funeral cover, and should you pass on as the principal person for this funeral cover, you don't have to worry again. It's just going to be passed on to the next person within your family. Asibahlule emakethe sitabuya sichubene nehlelo.
Be sure to catch Business Watch every Wednesday between 2 p.m. to 3 p.m, where we feature the latest updates on business news, market trends, and exclusive interviews with industry leaders, as well as insights on emerging small and medium enterprises in the commercial sector. Business Watch, your business leader.
Hey you! Yes, you. Have you paid your TV license?
Did you know that by paying for your TV license fees, you will be complying with the laws that govern television possession, in particularly the Swaziland Television Authority Act of 1983 and its regulations? It is a legal obligation.
Paying for your TV license can have a positive spin-off, as the money collected from TV license fees goes a long way in assisting Eswatini Television Authority procure appealing and relevant content to broadcast on the channel.
So now, these fees also increase purchasing of local content from independent producers, which helps ensure that the arts and film industry in the country is well supported thus far, ensures the creation of jobs for eMaSwati. The payment of TV license fees goes a really long way in such endeavors as well as nation building.
A TV license costs 180 emalangeni per year per device, and for other accessories such as a decoder or njinja, it costs 50 emalangeni per device per year.
By paying for your TV license,
you will be doing the right thing.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you'll go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience in the kingdom.
kunjalo masoda amahle kunathi lesa
sabatandi ukuthi njengalokhu
sibili sive sithi khulumeni.
Hi, I'm Alex. Let's talk about banks. Specifically, central banks. Believe it or not, they're really important to our everyday lives. Central banks manage the flow of money in a country's economy, so things don't go haywire. They're typically part of the government, although they should operate independently. The specific roles of central banks vary from country to country, but they usually have a few key responsibilities. Mainly, they're in charge of monetary policy to keep prices stable. One way they do this is through what's called the interest rate, which is the cost of borrowing money. Central banks lower interest rates, making credit cheap to boost the economy. Because when credit to buy things, such as homes, food, and cars gets cheaper, people tend to buy more. And who doesn't love that? But when prices get too high, central banks can raise rates, making money more expensive to borrow. This can slow growth, but it also brings down prices. Central banks also buy and sell foreign currency. They can do this to weaken or support the value of their own currency. Stability isn't just about keeping prices steady. That's why central banks also play a key role in preserving financial stability. For example, if a commercial bank is in trouble, a central bank can give them a loan, but only as a last resort. Central banks have been using all of these tools to help keep things stable for hundreds of years. Okay, so why am I telling you this? Well, whether you're buying bread, or a pomegranate, or even starting a business, that stability is important for all of us. And here at the IMF, a big part of our job is providing policy advice that can help central banks all over the world meet their price and financial stability goals.
Kwalomhle sixolisa kakhulu besifuna ukukhulumisa indzaba mental health awareness ne-clinical psychologist into mdlalo sebesifuna nje kubuka the importance of mental well-being and effective strategies for managing stress and emotional challenges. But ke solo setama ukuchumana naye ngetebuchwephesha sinetinsaya ke sihlangabetana nato satama ukuchumana naye kodwa indzaba lesitawuchubeka sitame kuyilungisa lena sachubeka nalo luhlelo kulesikhathi sitawubuka indzaba letichamuka ngephandle kwalapha events tawuqala sibuke lapha eGaza. The exodus of Palestinians from Gaza's last refuge accelerated as Israeli forces pushed deeper into the southern city of Rafah. Israel also pounded the territory devastated north, where some Hamas militants have regrouped in areas the military said it had cleared months ago. United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken reiterated opposition to a major military assault on Rafah. And he said that Israel would be left holding the bag on an enduring insurgency without an exit from Gaza and post-war governance plan.
Many thousands more Gazans fled the ruins of Rafah on Sunday after fresh Israeli evacuation orders the day before.
I wasn't planning to leave, but I'm leaving now because there's no one left in the camp.
We're tired and lost. We don't know where to go.
Israeli flyers point them towards the so-called humanitarian zone of Al-Mawasi on the coastline of northwestern Rafah, even though aid organizations say this area is not ready to receive an influx of displaced people. The first Israeli tanks rolled into Rafah last Tuesday, the first step in a major ground operation they say is indispensable for defeating Hamas and freeing the Israeli hostages taken on the 7th of October. But amid international outcry at what the UN says would be an epic humanitarian disaster, Their number one ally is turning up the heat.
And we've said to Israel that we will not support an operation in Rafah, a major military operation, in the absence of a credible plan to protect civilians.
And they still haven't
seen
delivered
that
it.
plan.
So,
adding that such an offensive would not be effective in eliminating Hamas. This after President Biden decided to suspend a shipment of 3,500 US bombs to Israel last week. And neighbouring Egypt has sent its strongest message yet, announcing it will formally support South Africa's genocide case against Israel before the International Court of Justice. Also calling on the UN Security Council to take immediate action to bring about a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and an end to military operations in Rafah. For some months now, hopes of a ceasefire agreement have been fleeting. US President Biden told an audience on Friday that there would be a ceasefire tomorrow if Hamas released the hostages, while Turkish President Erdogan condemned the US and European states' failure to pressure Israel into a ceasefire deal.
And the United States, Washington says it is working to resolve the many issues in the continuing conflict in Gaza as negotiations continue, and Israel plans to launch a full-scale operation in the southern city of Rafah over United States objections.
The grief of thousands of people underscores world leaders' urgent attempts to end the war in Gaza after more than 7 months. Fear hangs over the people of Gaza as they scramble for safety under the shadow of a threatened full Israeli offensive into the crowded city of Rafah. And growing youth anger over the unceasing violence has inflamed American universities and spread beyond the shores of the U.S. At this delicate point, the White House said Monday that Washington is still plugging away at negotiations in Cairo aimed at securing the release of hostages and a truce.
This particular negotiation has had its ups and downs, its ins and outs, its twists and turns. And what I laid out in my opening comments remains the case. There could be a ceasefire tomorrow if Hamas would just go ahead and release women, wounded, and elderly. We do believe Israel has put a good proposal on the table. Hamas has put a counter proposal on the table. The world is calling for a ceasefire. Those who are doing so should go to Hamas and say, come to the table and work until we get a deal.
And he acknowledged to VOA there are new fissures in that process. Egypt, which is hosting the negotiations, recently came out in support of South Africa's International Court of Justice case against Israel for genocide.
I can't say that it's helpful to the discussions between Egypt and Israel to try to sort out the humanitarian assistance and access issues, but I do know that Egypt, Israel, the United States, the United Nations, we are all trying to work together to figure out a way forward.
Analysts say Washington's message is also muddled, especially on Israel's plans to mount a major military operation in the southern Gaza city of Rafah. Sullivan said Monday that Israel has conducted only targeted strikes there so far.
There's been some mixed signals from the administration. Sometimes it seems like they're against anything in Rafah. Sometimes they say, no, we're not against, but we just haven't seen the right sort of plan. So I think that this needs to be clarified.
Meanwhile, as Washington tries to make a clear plan, Israel's leadership faces pressure from citizens who accuse Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of fanning the flames of Palestinian violence.
Just wanted to emphasize to Prime Minister Netanyahu his responsibility for what happened here on October 7th.
Meanwhile, as officials try to talk their way to peace, Israel's strikes on Gaza continue.
Russia said it had captured 4 more villages in Ukraine's Kharkiv region as thousands of residents were evacuated from the offensive in an area where Russian troops were repelled in 2022.
As Russian forces approached, Ukrainian police worked to evacuate civilians from the small border village. Russia says it captured at least 9 villages over the weekend, and local authorities say thousands of people have fled.
I was in the house and they opened fire at the door, and that's it. I'm being sent to a hospital in Kharkiv. I have no fingers. They are broken.
Ukraine's military chased Russian troops out of most of the Kharkiv region nearly 2 years ago. But with Russia's launch of a new armored ground attack, the front in northeastern Ukraine has reopened.
Russians are conducting so-called meat assaults. They're sending people to their deaths. They die, and their places are instantly taken by others and others and others. Human life is the cheapest thing in the Russian Federation, the very cheapest. They don't value the lives of their soldiers at all.
The new offensive means Russia could move its artillery within range of Kharkiv and renew the shelling of Ukraine's second-largest city. Russia may also be able to create a buffer zone to stop the frequent Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian targets. In addition, the offensive will force Ukrainian forces to shift limited manpower away from the front in Donbass, where Moscow's troops are gaining ground.
The attacks in the Kharkiv region are intended to stretch our forces and undermine the morale and motivation for Ukrainians to defend themselves.
Another reason for Russia's new assault is to exploit Ukrainian ammo shortages. Although the United States recently announced new aid packages and weapons shipments, some of it may take days or weeks to arrive.
Russian President Vladimir Putin proposed Andrei Belousov as the new Minister of Defense. Belousov previously served as first Deputy Prime Minister. This was reported by the Russian agency TASS. The current Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, he will instead replace Nikolai Patrushev as Secretary of the Russian Security Council. Shoigu had headed the Russian military department since the year 2012.
After 12 years serving as the Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu is fated to be replaced after Vladimir Putin began a cabinet reshuffle. The Russian president signed a decree appointing Shoigu as the Secretary of Russia's National Security Council and proposed civilian economist Andrei Belousov to replace him. As the war in Ukraine drags on, so does military spending, and the Kremlin says it wants to bring innovation into the Ministry of Defense.
It's important to note that today on the battlefield, the one who wins is the one who's more open to innovation or open to being as efficient as possible. And therefore, it's natural that at the current stage, the President decided that the Ministry of Defense should be headed by a civilian. And this is not just a civilian, but a man who headed the very successful Ministry of Economic Development of Russia, who for a long time was the President's assistant on economic issues.
Belousov's nomination will need to be approved by Russia's upper house in Parliament, the Federation Council. It will review nominations and report the results to Putin within a week.
As Russia pushed into northern Ukraine this week, the United States presidential race between Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump remained focused on another foreign policy crisis, the war in Gaza.
The northern Ukrainian border town of Volchansk, evacuating just hours ahead of when Russia claimed it captured the town. Ukraine fighting back with the more than $50 billion in assistance from the United States approved last month by President Joe Biden. He argued for months that aid to Ukraine is a centerpiece of U.S. national security policy.
If the United States walks away, it will put Ukraine at risk. Europe is at risk. The free world will be at risk, emboldening others to do what they wish to do us harm. My message to President Putin, who I've known for a long time, is simple. We will not walk away.
But analysts say presidential elections rarely turn on foreign policy issues.
The issue of Ukraine barely registers in the polls, and the issue of foreign policy, less than 5% of the people think that's an important issue, foreign policy generally, meaning the relationship that we have with China, Communist Party of China, but also pushing back on Putin and what's happening in Gaza.
Presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump has argued the U.S. already sends too much aid. Earlier this year, the former president suggested he would not adhere to the Mutual Self-Defense Pact if Russia invaded a NATO country.
I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want.
That message resonates with voters concerned about American involvement overseas.
The 20 years of the war on terror and the so-called endless wars probably converted more Americans to isolationism and America first, and that's why Donald Trump was successful in 2016 and why he is successful at having garnered all but officially the nomination of the Republican Party for 2024.
The push against funding Ukraine's defense against Russia put some Republicans in a difficult position this election year. But after months of delay, House Speaker Mike Johnson, a Trump supporter, the aid up for a successful vote.
I would rather send bullets to Ukraine than American boys.
With protests against the war in Gaza taking place on college campuses across the U.S., analysts say there is a bigger election season discussion about how U.S. aid is spent abroad.
I do know a number of young voters in this country who think carefully about their student loan debts, as an example. Why are we spending these billions and billions of dollars sending armaments abroad to Ukraine and sending armaments to Israel? Why aren't we using those monies domestically for other issues that need caring for in this country?
The aid to Ukraine approved by Congress in April is likely to be the last disbursement this year before the November presidential election.
Georgia's parliament is set to pass a highly controversial so-called foreign agents bill that has triggered widespread protests across the former Soviet republic nestled in the Caucasus Mountain. The vote comes after tens of thousands of people came out to protest the legislation in the capital, Tbilisi. The protests have been repressed by the police and around 20 people are detained.
Described by protesters as the Russian law, Georgia's parliament has approved a second reading of a bill that could threaten the country's media freedom. It would require the press and NGOs to register as pursuing the interests of a foreign power if they receive more than 20% of funding from abroad. It's being called the Russian law because Moscow uses similar legislation to crack down on independent media, non-profits and activists critical of the Kremlin. Following Monday's approval, opposition MPs denounced the ruling Georgian Dream Party.
The government moved into an illegitimate field. The government went against the constitution, and in the coming days, if the representatives of Russia in the Georgian parliament bring this case to an end, they will be delegitimized internationally.
EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell described the parliament's move as very concerning and warned a final adoption could impact Georgia's path towards joining the EU. The bill has caused thousands of Georgians to take to the street over the last weeks, who say they want to be closer to Europe and not Russia.
We are all fighting for the future of Georgia. We are defending our country.
Georgia's president has been critical of the law and vowed to veto it. But the Georgian Dream Party, who the president is increasingly at odds with, has a majority sufficient to override a veto. The bill is due to go for a third and final reading in Parliament on Tuesday.
6 years after plunging Spain into its worst political crisis in decades, Catalonia's separatist parties are in danger of losing their hold on power in the northeastern region after the pro-union Socialist Party scored a historic result in Sunday's election.
A new era for Catalans, such as the promise of socialist leader Salvador Illa, after securing the largest share of votes in the region's parliamentary election, meaning Catalonia could be led by a party opposed to independence.
Everything is going to change. If Salvador Illa governs, healthcare will change, education will change, hope will return. I'm very happy.
This is good news for Catalonia and also for the Socialist Party of Catalonia, because it seems to be the direction we need in this country to move towards a more stable, less unbalanced, more comfortable situation.
It's a huge blow to the pro-independence parties, who have now lost their decade-long hold on power in Catalonia. 6 years after Carles Puigdemont and the separatist leaders led an independence bid which plunged Spain into a deep political crisis, pro-independence sentiment in the region of 8 million has weakened, with the public becoming more concerned about social issues.
The work of the Republican government, of the pro-independence and left-wing government, and the commitment to negotiation to resolve the political conflict that allows to end the repression and open paths has either not been sufficiently valued by the citizens, or the citizens have considered that now it's up to someone else to lead a new stage.
The Socialist Party claimed 42 seats in Parliament, a first for them in 45 years, but is still short of the 68-seat majority needed to rule. It will have to seek the backing of others like the Republican left ERC from the separatist camp or other left-wing parties. It presents a major victory and vindication for Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, who has worked on calming tensions in Catalonia after years of political crisis, notably his widely unpopular amnesty bill that would benefit nationalist leaders facing legal action following their succession attempt in 2017.
As India goes to the polls, arch-rival Pakistan is closely watching. Arch-rival Pakistan is closely watching. Islamabad is irked that Indian politicians have taken a tough stance on Pakistan to try woo voters.
Machines at Sarina Textile Industries near Pakistan's eastern city Lahore produce fabrics for some of the country's biggest brands and businesses across the globe. But Pakistan's eastern neighbor India, one of the world's largest markets, is off limits.
We will get cheaper raw materials which we were getting before the trade embargo. Finer fabrics, our lawns and our cambrics and cottons are very well liked in India.
Islamabad suspended trade with India in August 2019 after New Delhi unilaterally ended the autonomous status of the disputed Jammu and Kashmir territory. Pakistani businesses want Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's new government to resume trade ties in a bid to ease economic pain. But as India goes to the polls, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is presenting himself as tough compared to the main opposition party Congress in cracking down on Pakistan's alleged cross-border terror activities.
As soon as I came to power, I said enough is enough. Today, Pakistan is complaining to the world and crying, "Save us, save us."
Partitioned in 1947, the two nuclear-armed nations have fought multiple wars and routinely accuse each other of cross-border terrorism. Pakistani experts say Indian politicians can't afford to look soft on Pakistan.
Congress, they are labeling Modi as the close friend of Mr. Sharif in Pakistan. So this is a pattern. They are addressing to extremist voters, especially the BJPs, and they are point scoring that we would be hard and we would be harsh on Pakistan.
BJP is the Modi-led Bharatiya Janata Party. Tensions reached a high point in 2019 when India and Pakistan engaged in an air skirmish for the first time in decades. Still, since 2021, both sides have largely maintained one of their longest ceasefires along the de facto border in Kashmir. As Modi eyes a historic third term in office, some in Pakistan think he may choose the path of peace despite sounding like a hawk.
So if he is to go down history, he has to leave some legacy. So I see that a chance for Modi to make his name in terms of making peace with Pakistan.
Islamabad recently urged Indian politicians to stop dragging Pakistan into what the Foreign Office called India's populist public discourse. Experts say that while Pakistan bashing may woo some Indian voters, once elections are over, governments on both sides put campaign rhetoric behind and work quietly to resolve issues. Zaman's profits would soar if he could trade with India, but he is not hopeful of a breakthrough if Modi, a Hindu nationalist, returns.
From the past 10 years that he's been in power, it does not give rise to a lot of optimism being a Muslim and a Pakistani.
And in South Africa, the South African government is hoping to strengthen protections for whistleblowers who report on corruption in business and government. Proponents say it's not only about making whistleblowers feel comfortable coming forward, but also about protecting them from retaliation.
Martha Ngoi was the legal executive at the state-owned passenger rail agency of South Africa when she came forward with proof of unlawful government contracts worth millions. In response, she says, she was fired by her employer in 2021 and has been involved in a lengthy and costly legal battle to get her job back.
You know, psychologically as well, it's taken a huge toll, psychologically, not only on me, on my daughter as well, and the family as well. But I've been fortunate because I've had a support structure.
As Ngoi continues her legal fight, she participates in the Whistleblower House, a civil society organization that supports and advises people who reveal corruption in South Africa. For others in South Africa, their whistleblowing led to tragedy. Government employee Babita Deokaran was a witness in a fraud investigation into improper COVID-era medical supply contracts. She was shot to death in 2021 after her role in the inquiry became known. Investigative journalist Jeff Wicks spent months investigating the circumstances that led to her killing.
In the weeks before she was killed, she had stumbled across anomalous payment patterns and had reported them to her superiors. She'd wanted an urgent investigation and a stop to the payments. And even just days before she was killed, she sent a message to her boss saying, these guys might be onto us if we stop their money and our lives might be in danger. And that message turned out to be fairly prescient because she was killed within less than a week.
Cynthia Stumple exposed corruption in South Africa's state-owned airlines. She now works at Whistleblower House.
My own view is that whistleblowers are truly important in fighting corruption because they are the ones who highlight and expose and speak out about either fraud happening in their workplace, corruption, and so they are that first point of call.
The South African government is reviewing its current whistleblower laws as part of a national anti-corruption strategy. Uglesha Radulovic from the University of Johannesburg researches the plight of whistleblowers. He says that the legislation protecting whistleblowers needs to be broadened and strengthened.
Penalize those that are retaliating against whistleblowers. And the second thing that would be crucial would be to create a stronger relationship between the state and civil society, and an independent state institution could provide the resolution there.
Ngoyi is all for whistleblower law reform. She says right now they are not getting the support and protection they desperately need.
At the end of the day, it is important for whistleblowers to speak truth to power. If we really do want change in this country and we want to leave some kind of a legacy and future for our kids, people have got to speak out.
The government proposals include granting whistleblowers government protection and imposing criminal charges on organizations that ignore whistleblowers' information.
With Chad recently confirming Mahamat Deby as civilian president after a long-delayed election, Western powers are watching to see what role, if any, they will play in countering terror threats in the Sahel region.
Mahamat Deby's election as Chad's president follows the 2021 death of his father Idriss Deby and marks the completion of the country's three-year transition from military rule. It also means the Deby family has ruled Chad since 1990. The younger Deby, the former military ruler, won the presidency last week. Western powers watched the results of the election closely, while critics denounced the vote as neither free nor fair. In the last 2 years, Sahel countries fighting insurgencies with militant groups linked to Islamic State and Al-Qaeda have severed security ties with Western partners, particularly France and the United States. Chad is the last of these countries to maintain a military link with those countries. Asked if Western nations will be eager to work with Deby now that he is a civilian and not a military ruler, one analyst replied,
He's more legitimate to a certain extent, both domestically and internationally. So there is less pressure that can be exerted on him to go one way or another. He has a mandate. Whether the elections were free and fair, it's a different question. This is debated. But at least he has this title. He is now the new elected president of Chad.
Some analysts say Deby is trying to leverage his power as the last remaining Western partner in the Sahel conflict to gain better contributions from them. Many Sahel countries have turned to Russia for military assistance in confronting terrorists. Days before the election, some of the US troops based in Chad were asked to leave. The United States has said it's keen to negotiate the return of the troops now that the election is over. Guvi thinks Washington may confront Deby on the issue, even as attention shifts to other parts of the continent.
I think in general we've seen interest waning since probably around 2021, shift focus away from the Central Sahel and towards countries on the Gulf of Guinea, coastal states.
Another analyst, Dan Izenga of the Washington-based Africa Center for Strategic Studies, says he doesn't think the US does want to further disengage from Chad, but may be looking to reassess how it engages with the region.
Have we been acting in accordance with our values and interests,
Or have we been acting in ways that are perhaps counterproductive, or if not counterproductive, not necessarily moving the needle in the direction that we would like to see in terms of improved security or improved development or improved socioeconomic conditions just for people in general.
Several analysts told VOA that despite Debby's victory, he is not immune to being ousted in a coup. Coups are increasingly common in the Sahel, leading to the nickname Africa's coup belt. This will also play into
how much to invest and whether or not it's really of value to remain connected deeply to a partner that has just inherent instability baked in.
Analysts agree Debby's relationship with France, which has around 1,000 troops based in Chad, is unlikely to change, however.
Analysts say Russia is adopting a so-called hybrid approach to growing its strategic influence in the Arctic through research, increased maritime activities and tourism for the inhabitants of one remote Norwegian community. The announcement of a new boat bringing tourists from Russia means more than just a few extra visitors.
Norwegian companies dominate the tourism industry here in Svalbard, a remote Norwegian archipelago approximately 600 kilometers north of the mainland. One company, Brim Explorer, is at the cutting edge, using hybrid electric engines for some of its vessels, among the first in the world to do so for tourism at sea. But Russia has also got its eyes set on the island's tourism industry. Because of Svalbard's unusual legal framework, countries other than Norway that are signatories to the century-old Svalbard Treaty are allowed to carry out economic activity here. Russia announced in April it would be sending its own boat, carrying tourists to the island. Asked how it could affect their business, Agnes Arnadottir, CEO of Brim Explorer, said,
I don't think it will affect us, but of course I understand that the Russian settlements want to keep up their activity on the tourism side. Geopolitically, it's important to maintain activity in Svalbard.
Norway's presence in Svalbard means it could potentially deny Russia's Northern Fleet access to the Atlantic in the event of a conflict. For that reason, analysts say, Russia maintains a presence on the island, which it's entitled to, primarily in the form of Barentsburg, a town of some 400 mostly Russian and Ukrainian people. Most military activity on Svalbard is banned under the treaty, but analysts say Russia is adopting a so-called hybrid approach to growing its influence here. That means gradually developing legitimate activities like research, industry and tourism, and increasing its maritime presence, ultimately for strategic aims. One academic says some have noticed a recent ramping up of Russia's rhetoric around Svalbard too.
Well, first of all, there have been these declarations, an official Russian declarations, which have been very critical on Norway, alleging that Norway is militarizing the islands, running NATO's errand, and so on. Quite strong wording, which is, of course, interpreted by people in it as a very hostile.
John Fitcher Hoffman, an assistant to the governor of Svalbard, a member of Norway's police security service, told VOA there are frequent minor infringements of regulations by Russians on the island, including misuse of helicopters, which should only be used to assist mining, and
the driving around with the vehicles in Barentsburg with Russian number plates instead of the Norwegian official number plates that they are supposed to have.
In May of 2023, inhabitants of Barentsburg organised a Russian Victory Day procession, which many locals here say had militaristic overtones. This year, Svalbard's governor said celebrations were significantly more subdued, after last year's caught global media attention.
Whether this is because they've figured that out themselves, or if somebody has from Moscow said that it's better to have a more modest celebration, we don't know.
The Russian special consul in Barentsburg, who, according to a 2023 investigation by the Norwegian broadcaster NRK, is an operative for Russian military intelligence, declined a request for interview. With Russia working to grow its influence across the Arctic and its bases in the region now outnumbering NATO's 3-1, its proposed tourist boat to Svalbard is likely just the tip of the iceberg.
That is how we wrap up our international news today. We go for a net break. We connect with Sanele Sibia, economist. We want to look at Eswatini's economic outlook with all these developments happening around the country.
We've all got our own idea of what's good. For one person, it could be a bowl of ice cream. For another, it's listening to their favorite song. But for economists and governments, good is something else altogether. In fact, there's even something they call a public good. Does that mean sharing your ice cream? Not quite. Hi, I'm Alex. You probably use some form of a public good all the time. They're where a lot of our taxes go. Roads, schools, parks, even national defense. They're things that everyone in a country, taxpayer or not, can benefit from and enjoy without them ever being used up. And that's not even the half of it. If we adjust our scope, we see that these things are all around us. Sunshine, air, and a whole lot more. Economists consider these things public goods too, but they're even more than that. They're considered global public goods because they don't belong to any one country. They do still benefit us all, no matter where we come from. In fact, some of them, like clean air, are things we can't even live without, but they're sure not treated the same. For example, there's way more public funding for national defense than there is for fighting climate change. But is that how it should be? Think of it this way. If you stop maintaining a road, or a school, or a bridge for that matter, it would fall apart. So everyone pitches in through their tax money for upkeep and repairs to prevent that from happening. On a global scale, it's pretty similar. Unless countries come together to protect and maintain the things that we all benefit from, those global public goods, we'll be much worse off, and in some cases, we'll end up ruining them forever. In today's world, global public goods like the environment are under threat from pollution and overuse. And others like trade, financial stability, and public health are all global concerns that require maintenance and international cooperation. That's where international organizations come in, to keep the world connected on these issues. The G20 is a good example of that. We also have the United Nations for diplomacy, the World Health Organization for public health, and yeah, the IMF for economic growth and stability. But there's a role for us all to play here. The good news is that people and governments are increasingly recognizing their benefits. And if we act now, both current and future generations will get to enjoy them too.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi aba research bafunze. Being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kulula.
Nathi kufuna sente ukukhicita lokusemndeni.
Right, it's 33 minutes after 7. If you have just joined us, thank you so much for joining Kusile Breakfast Show. Nalomuhla Ekseni. You can still rewind and catch up with everything that has happened on the show on our YouTube channel, Eswatini TV. It has been quite the insightful show again today. In this very segment, we want to get into a conversation with Sanele Sibia, an economist who provides insights into the ambitious economic developments in Eswatini. These include the construction construction of the new central bank complex and its broader economic implications. We also want to sneak in the recent development of the construction of the Manzini Mall, which was officially announced yesterday. Kutsumsebenzi sevele uyaqala, a 2 billion emalangeni project set to employ over 1,500 eMaswati, and that's according to the Commerce, Industry and Trade Minister Manqoba Khumalo, as well as other foreign investment projects that we see, like the Semlex project, as well as the other project eswabone inkosi iwavakashela ehlane around March this year. There's a lot that is happening, and that is exciting for the infrastructural development of Eswatini, as well as the human development, because kutavuleka nematfuba emisebenzi kusakhiwa ke letakhiwo letawenda facelift lapha eveni lakangwane. Mr. Sibiya, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Mr. Sibiya joins us virtually, by the way, via a video Zoom link. As I welcome you to the program, Mr. Sibiya, how do you perceive the impact of the ambitious goals set by His Majesty King Mswati III for the construction of the new Central Bank of Eswatini complex on the country's economy?
Good morning, Mr. Ngumalo, and good morning to the viewer at home. Yes, as you know, the country is on a vigorous drive to actually attain a growth rate of 5%. So at present, we are predicted to grow at a rate around 4.1 to 4.9%. So these infrastructure projects are actually going to drive and catalyze growth in the country in the short to medium term. Like you've already said, this is going to be done through job creation and, the short term and the longer term goals, hoping that, in the background, we will be able to sustain those gains. So we actually do applaud and we do commend His Majesty's moves, in terms of trying to attract foreign direct investments, and actually, the government of the Kingdom of Eswatini in cultivating and cultivating an environment that is actually ready to, that is ready and conducive for businesses to come into play and really develop the infrastructure. Because what we are seeing here is both private and public sector led type of infrastructure developments. And then coming to the issue of the central bank complex. So when we look at that one, I would say our analysis of that issue has to be twofold. Number one, it's the injection of 1 billion into the economy over the next 3 years. So now that's a huge injection, and we do expect such an injection to actually trickle and have a multiplier effect in the economy. So we know that pumping in the 1 billion into the economy will actually grow the economy more than the 1 billion. And secondly, it also speaks to the rigor with which the central bank aims to actually stabilize the economy and actually proactively play its role in the economy, because we are talking of a 7-story building from the central bank will be moving from, I think it's a 7 or 8-story building plus Mfumbe building. So that means one can actually already foresee that the central bank has bigger plans, and the central bank wants to ramp up so that it can play its supervisory role and in terms of bank supervision and non-bank supervision in the country. As you know, the country has been grappling with quite a number of these issues regarding, the control and the integrity of the financial system. And we've seen the central bank vigorously coming into play and, steadfast in playing their role. So that's what we are seeing in this case. So it's going to be both improved regulatory environment, because I don't think they'd be building such a big structure if they didn't really want to expand and consolidate their operations in the country. So now that is going to also drive longer term growth once we have a central bank that is adequately staffed and has all the adequate facilities to perform their role, Mr. Zimano.
Yeah. Quite a mouthful there, Mr. Sibiya, and I do want us to get back to that answer, but before we get back into that particular proposition that you have just made in answering that question, maybe I want us to look at the employment opportunities emphasized by the King as well for Emaswati workers and the potential engagement of local construction companies during the construction phase. How do you assess the potential socio-economic benefits of such prioritization?
Central bank aside, and when we look into and I'll get back to why I'm saying central bank aside, when we are looking into the other infrastructure developments that we are going to have in the country, that, when we looked at the budget and when you follow trends, you will see that, His Majesty's government is pursuing in the short to medium term. We know there is the fuel reserve plant that is being constructed. That's around 2 billion that we expected to pump into the economy. And then there's also the Kondongwavuma Dam. Again, that's another couple of billions that will be pumped into the economy. And then we're also looking into the private sector, developments that are really booming in the country. So what one expects from there is to actually really see, jobs in the short to medium term, driven by these infrastructure developments in the country. But what we need as a country now is, yes, we are going to be reaping those socio-economic benefits, as you rightly put it. Emaswati will be employed in all of this. And we've always advocated, for a proper inclusion of the local construction companies and the local communities into those value chains, so that at the end of the day, we have companies that are going to be capacitated to actually deliver in the future without international support. So then that way we'll be growing our own economy. But one would caution that, as we are doing and investing so much money into these infrastructure developments, we also need to think long term on how we are going to solve the unemployment problem. Yes, during the construction period, we do expect, the unemployment numbers to somehow go down. But, we are hoping that, as we are moving forward and trying to really implement what we've called private sector-led growth, the minister has been big on private sector-led growth. So then what we're expecting there is eventually we are going to see, jobs growing in the private sector and Emaswati being employed, for a longer term. But what one can caution is, trickle-down economics does not work if one does not have a deliberate plan to actually say, I'm going to ensure that the jobs come into Emaswati and they go into Emaswati. And then the issue of the central bank, the central bank has to be a highly secured building. So in terms of employment, there's a lot of security clearances that one would have to get in order for one to participate in the building. But we do hope that, local companies would be able to pass that screening or get involved in one way or the other within the construction of that building, so that at least a portion of that billion is left in Eswatini and can actually drive the local multiplier effect instead of us actually exporting those. So, with that one, I'd have to say there's a lot of national security issues and national security clearances that need to be taken into place, into cognizance, because, we are talking of construction of the national votes in this case. So that one has to be done under quite a lot of stringent security. But, in terms of the other security, of the other capital projects, we do expect those to contribute positively to the unemployment problem in the short to medium term, during the 2-3 years in which the projects will be ongoing.
Yeah, two things that I'm picking up from that answer that I feel like we should, elucidate more on. The first one is thinking long term. You cautioning that, we should be, aware, or rather be wary of trickle down economics. And that's the idea that, as the wealthy get more wealthier, they should distribute their wealth into, the broad society. Let's get into, the dangers of that and how you propose, solutions to a potential, problem that could confront us should we not really, take caution of it. It has been a conversation, the quality of jobs that, all of these investments come with. Talk to me about how you propose we really move forward with a feasible plan that will not have us lamenting or, swimming in complaints after these investments have been, fully invested in. Two, you spoke about inclusion. It's a two-part question. You spoke about inclusion, yes, attributing to, how it is affirming that a lot of construction companies now are all, getting a piece of the cake. how important is the inclusion now of all the projects, and I'm glad you mentioned all the developmental projects that we see happening, not just at the CBE La Ezulwini, but around the country. You spoke about Inzaba, I think Ndabo Puzumoya, all these, strategic development projects that we see. How important are they in fitting into government's core mandate of decentralization, our Dinkundla system of governance? Let's see, vele lo sito luyele ebantwini lentuthuko ingabi lambabane kuphela. We do see these projects, going into other places, lapha eveni as well.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ngumalo. So let me just first start with the one of trickle economics and how we can, of trickle-down economics, and how as a country we can make sure that, we are able to sustain the gains in the long term. So the issue of trickle-down economics, going back all the way to Margaret Thatcher, who was known to be the champion of trickle-down economics, evidence in the field of economics has shown us that, basically, the wealthy would have less interest in reinvesting the money, and they'd always try to find ways of making profits, and that means at times it might mean not necessarily hiring as many people as one would hope. So that's the problem with trickle-down economics. We expect that the ones with whom, or the ones who are going to receive the money, are actually going to be quite benevolent to share it with the rest of the country and the rest of the population. But that never really works in the short and in the long term, even in the short term, because everyone is in business to make profits. We are not there to share the money with people. So what we then need to do as a country is, as we are championing private sector-led growth, we should actually be in a way thinking of how do we get jobs to come and settle in Eswatini, the jobs that would actually employ Emaswati. So in order for us to do that, I think what we need to draw on is the skills report that was published by the Ministry of Education, if I'm not mistaken, just so that we see the type of skills that we have in the country, and such that when we go out there to seek foreign direct investment, we do seek foreign direct investment that can actually absorb the type of skills that we have in the country and be along those lines. So we need to, as a country, strategically place our FDI package in a way that will drive, in the short to medium term, that will drive a labor-intensive production process, so that we do employ a lot of Emaswati. So we've got to think beyond the short-term projects, because construction projects tend to last for 3 to 5 years, after which there'll be no jobs. And as we move towards completion, there really becomes no job at the end of the day for the people. So what we need to think around as a country is, number one, how do we get these billions of money that we are plowing into the economy to actually work and capacitate Emaswati? That's where I talk of issues of inclusion. Let us make sure that when we are building the strategic oil reserves in Puzumoya, we are able to actually empower local companies in Puzumoya and in Eswatini to actually take charge and be the ones driving this growth, and be the ones participating actively within that construction value chain. So that is number one. As we are thinking and planning of this big joint venture projects, let us make sure we include local companies into the value chain. So what that does, Mr. Ngumalo, is, when we've included local companies into the value chain, we are transferring not just skills, but we are also transferring capital. So what we are growing is now a local company that will grow, such that eventually that company can be able to bid for a tender. But what our businesses need is that support while they are growing. And the only way they can get that support is if they do get a pie in that capital project, in the capital project expenditures, which we call CapEx. So they need to get a pie of that. Once you've empower the locals both with the skill, which they would then be able to learn from, these giant construction companies, then we are actually expecting to have those sustainable economies. And then I like the fact that you've brought in the issue of decentralization. So imagine a situation where we have taken these small companies and we've capacitated them. There is nothing stopping us except for legislation which can be changed. We could, as a country, make sure that our companies do get, the road maintenance tenders and all of those things within the constituency, because there is money that also goes there through constituency development. And once we've capacitated the companies, then they stand ready to take advantage of that. So that's what we would mean by saying, let's plan long term. So once we're able to think and plan long term and have the local companies take charge of their local development in terms of the road maintenance and all of those programs. In economics, we call those public works program. They've proven to be quite successful when you look at the story of South Africa from 1994 to the early 2000s. That is how the economy, that is how the empowerment came about. Just giving local companies, those local public work programs, so that they're able to sustain. And we've seen that some of them grow bigger, because that's the whole point. You support them in the short to medium term and make sure they get a slice of the cake so that they can grow bigger. So we've got to also think as a country of how we capacitate our local investors. That's not just within the construction center, across the spectrum of the economy. Yes, we know eventually it makes sense to say, let me give a tender to one big company. It's easy for government to actually manage that. But we could structure that as a country to say, make sure you employ 50% or 70% local companies as subcontractors and all of those things. Those are things we can put into the contracts that we give these big joint ventures. So that way we're able to utilize the money not only to build the structure, but also as a catalyst for the SME to grow. And in so doing, we are growing sustainable local companies which can grow to actually sustain the economy. And once you have done that, what you will find is, you improve and increase the multiplier effect. So the growth that we see in the short to medium term would actually be quite more than the growth that we expect, because a lot of the money will be kept within the local economy, just improving spending within the local economy. So that is number one. And then secondly, as we are building these strategic investments, we also need to think of how then are we going to get business to come into Eswatini, because we now have these strategic investments. We've got to think of restructuring our foreign direct investments, Mr. Ngumalo, that foreign direct investment strategy. And in this regard, we've seen the King, really taking lead and really going to countries like Turkey and then coming back with investors. So what we need is we need to see more of those. And one thing I like about the current government is, they've been quite visible, and you've got, like, for example, the Minister of Commerce, they've been vigorously out there, putting themselves out there, traveling with APA to these different symposiums. But what we need now is to have a strategy and a package that would work for the economy that we have now. Moving from the tax-based incentives, or structuring our tax-based incentives in a way that we are able to force these international companies that are coming in to actually employ more of eMaswati. And then we will think of the longer term, when we have seen that, eMaswati are now in employment. And then that's when you start thinking of loosening, allowing companies to be more efficient, once we know the private sector has grown enough to create jobs for eMaswati across the spectrum.
Mr. Spear, I like the fact that you do, highlight and acknowledge what His Majesty's government has been doing, obviously spearheaded by His Majesty the King in attracting foreign investment into the country. Just, recently, the 17th of the previous month, we saw the sword cutting of the construction site for Semlex Group state-of-the-art Africa head offices. And just recently, last week, we saw Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Minister Chawuka, in Nairobi, Kenya, nanabo ba invite my investors to come and plant fertilizer manufacturing plants lapha even. But one wants to ask then the importance, maybe, say, of, finding that balance in having our own domestic developments happening that will create quality jobs for eMaswati, and at the same time have the foreign investment, because what we have seen, the advent of the the African Continental Free Trade Area, as well as other bilateral and multilateral agreements, they are ready to launch us to the world from Eswatini with our own, tailor-made products. How important is it to maintain that balance of foreign investment as well as our own investment that is going to launch us to the world? If you can answer that just briefly. We don't have enough time now.
Thank you, Mr. Numado. So, when you are looking into domestic companies, they tend to be more resilient and they stay with the domestic economy throughout the spectrum. So what we are looking at here is a question of, do we want all the resources to fly out of the country, or we want to retain some of the resources? And the answer to that is we want to retain some of the resources in the country. And we've seen quite a lot of countries in the region, pushing what they call indigenization policies. Domestically, I think we call it the Citizen Empowerment Bill. So basically, it is quite imperative that we find that balance between the foreign sector and the private sector and the domestic sector, so that in essence, the country grows in a more balanced path with growth that is going to be sustained over the years, and once that is led by local companies. But one must caution, Mr. Numado, that when all is said and done, what the country needs to move forward to is to a situation where jobs are created by the markets. When I say that, I mean jobs are created by the private sector, and that sector is more sustainable in terms of job creation. So it is imperative that we empower our local companies so that they begin to create jobs and they participate in the economy as active private sector participants. That way would be well on our path towards sustained growth and inclusive growth, because we cannot just talk of growth, Mr. Numado. It has to be inclusive. It has to, every Liswati has to benefit from the growth that we are pushing as a country. It doesn't have to be an issue where the country grows and quite a number of the citizens do not feel the impacts of that growth.
Mr. Spear, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Quite the insightful engagement that we've had with you with very limited time, but that was quite a mouthful. We are really, hoping that with the recommendations that you have given, they will heed to them, and hopefully Livela Gangwane will come out of the doldrums. We have been, speaking quite a lot about the many problems that confront us, but what has been beautiful, just like you have alluded, what you like about this particular parliament, is that indeed the private sector, as you allude, is expected to intensify its efforts of exploiting opportunities presented by regional and international markets, and as well domestically make sure that less sustainable quality. Thank you so much again for joining us on the program, and that is the end of our program today. After that insightful engagement with economist Sanele Sbia, this marks the end of our show today. Hopefully you'll stay tuned to Eswatini TV. A lot is coming up. There's a special broadcast that is coming up looking at the energy in Daba. We also have really interesting programs for you later on the show, like Business Watch and Market View. Business Watch is tomorrow, but Market View today at 2 p.m. So do stay tuned and enjoy all the other programs by Eswatini TV. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Phela ama-culprits lentisa labantwana letika ngoba umntwana lona 11 lona 12 lona 13 lona 14 lokulala nje usangakucabanga
nangabe kunenombolo which are so horrifying and spine-chilling over a very short space of time. Labantwana bavikelekile yini.
Indzaba ithi bantwana solo bayakhulelwa. And then the thing is, what must be done now? Ngeke sihlale mengameli sigoce etandla sithi ngoba umntwana akakafanele kulala. Sidabe siyadmislead mengameli nasiyibuka from that approach.
Ubhlungu mangabe siyiphalamende sitawuthi bampa bethu 11-12 sithi akahamba ye clinic siyomfaka implant sesimnika imvume kokuthi akalale noma singaphucuka kwani Madam President simaswati
kasho isikole esincane lesa kusingaba nenombolo engaka abantwana lokusa mhlambe ba pregnant abekho esikoleni kuyathusa kakhulu nase kuthiwa inombolo engaka ephuma esikoleni sisinye
lana sikhulumisa i-national policy umthetho waleli velo. I didn't take it from the back of my head.
Mthomkhulwini lesitalithoda ngoba abantwana bawugcina bahlaba ngalomjovo bagcine bangasatali.
Umsebenzi wethu singemaswati is to protect the family and to protect the dignity of human lives.
I've got so many of these kids. Labamithiswe bobabe labadzala babafakela ne-infection yale HIV. Akuboshwe bona.